Yeah, well, I was very privileged to be born into a Christian home. My father was probably one of the most godly men that I know, and just a real hero to me. But both my mom and my dad came from Christian homes themselves and had a Christian home, and that's what I was born into. So very, very privileged in that way.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Fix on Jesus. My name is Rich and I'm your host along with Mark Johnson Jr. just across the table.
Hello.
And we have Heather Corbitt behind the glass. And
no mic today.
She has Happy Hands back there, and she is in the Happy Hands Club, one of the charter members of the Happy Hands Club. Actually, today's a special day, isn't it, Mark?
Yes, it is.
It's Fix on Jesus podcast, but it's interview edition, isn't it?
Correct. Yes, we're like 3 podcasts in one.
We are, yeah, exactly. We got Rapid Fire Friday questions, we have regular topics, and we have interviews. And this is our 3rd interview.
Yep.
If you haven't had a chance to listen, you can listen to the interview we did with Jeff Palin talking about the upcoming church plant to the Boise area. And then recently we interviewed Lynn Baird, who's our founding pastor.
Yeah.
And now we interview our longest standing pastor. Who served here for 35 years, Trey Richardson. He's retired, but we still get free labor out of him. So he's here. How you doing, Dad?
Doing good. Glad to be here.
Well, you already heard him call him Dad, so let's just get our conflicts of interest out of the way.
It's a conflict of interest?
I think it's something the audience needs to know. So there's 2 things they need to know.
Okay,
One,
2. Yes.
Trey is Rich's dad.
Correct.
And the second, Trey is also my landlord.
That's true.
So we just had to get it all out there.
All
now
these
that we know who's at
right?
the table.
Exactly. All these connections, right?
Yeah. So.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, now everybody knows.
Yep.
Caveat emptor. Do you know what that means?
No. There's a lot of things that I don't know.
It's fine. I'm not going to. People say I give you too hard of a time. I'm not going to say anything.
I got some private emails about it, but the poll showed that you don't.
But I want to be sensitive to folks out
there. To millennials?
No, it's not just millennials, but I want to be sensitive to, okay, Mark, maybe that's an opportunity for you to grow in learning some Latin.
Maybe.
So go look up caveat emptor, and then we can talk about that later. So I hope that's growth for people who say I'm too strong and too hard on Mark. Okay, so we're going to interview you, Dad. So let me just give a quick biography. I know this by heart because I lived it too. Trey is 73 years old at the time of when you're listening to this, and is has
6 foot, handsome. Don't forget,
we're not doing all that.
Okay.
Like
in this corner, we have.
I don't know if he's at his fighting weight anymore, but
more.
He has been the longest standing pastor in the history of Center Church, having arrived to be a member of the pastoral team here in 1989, after having served in lay leadership in our sister church in El Paso, Texas. And there's a lot more where that came from, but we'll talk about this as we unfold the interview. He, on the team generally, and we'll get into this more, is his primary role has been to counsel and to disciple and to shepherd over those decades. And so that's so if you know him here at Center Church, you probably know him in that way. But what we want to do is we want to give you a broader introduction to who he is and let you get to know who he is from his own words. Maybe pull some things out of him you didn't think you don't know that you've ever heard from him. Maybe he's not even planning on saying here today. So that's our goal, right?
We'll see. We'll see how the Spirit works in all of this.
Yeah, that's right.
And I conspired behind the scenes to try to figure out some things that even you don't know about your own father.
Great. That's great.
But we'll see. We'll see. So I guess we can kick it off. One of the themes we wanted to start with was your childhood, as far as did you grow up? And I know some of this, and obviously your son knows quite a bit. Did you grow up in a Christian home? If so, what was it like? And then I believe you were part of the Church of Christ.
So don't jump ahead. Let's let him unfold it. Okay.
Let's
let him unfold it.
Well, yeah.
Tell us about where you were born, your parents, your family, that stuff.
Yeah, well, I was very privileged to be born into a Christian home. My father was probably one of the most godly men that I know, and just a real hero to me. His family my family, all grew up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So that was where I was born in Fort Worth, Texas in 1951. My dad had been in World War II, so it was kind of that post-war era. But both my mom and my dad came from Christian homes themselves and had a Christian home, and that's what I was born into. So very, very privileged in that way.
Now he grew up in Alvarado, Texas, right?
Right.
And there was, he had land there, correct?
Yep. My grandfather had actually some land that was homesteaded after the Civil War.
Homestead is like what?
Homestead is when you plant your flag on a section of property and the government will deed it to you if you cultivate it and work it, which they did.
And what did they work on? What kind of stuff did they do with the land?
Well, they had some crops on it, but mostly they just built a home there, and they had a little lake on the property. So my granddad did so many different things to provide for his home. He actually had a little business where he would sell bait and fishing tackle.
So like power bait with the neon style, like the neon and the glitter?
Live bait back then.
Oh, live bait.
Minnows and worms.
All right.
And charge people to go fishing in the lake.
Oh, okay.
And he actually built
Did he
a
stock
golf
that lake?
course.
He stocked the lake?
He did not stock the lake.
It was already full of fish.
It had fish.
Because by the time we got there was no fish that we found.
No. Well, we caught fish there.
We did?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Required patience.
Exactly.
Okay.
But he also created a 9-hole golf course on the property. And back then, there were not grass greens. They were oiled sand were the greens.
Wow.
And so people would play to go. It had a little spring on the property, and they called it, something Springs Golf Course.
Oh, cool. Now, I'm sure people are madly Googling Alvarado, Texas. Where is Alvarado? They just, for those that aren't and they're driving, please put your phones down if you're driving. You don't want to be unsafe as you drive looking for Alvarado, Texas in your haste. Where is it?
It is south of Fort Worth, about 45 miles or so.
South. Okay. Back then it was separated from Fort Worth. Yes, it was like its own little city. Now it's all grown, all overgrown, right?
Yep.
And Alvarado's on the way off the 35, right? Was where the land was, right?
It was off. There was another highway number. I think it was 67.
Oh, okay.
But it was off of 35.
On the way to Waco.
Go quite a bit more, and you get to Waco.
Yeah. Okay. Did you grow up going to that land as a kid?
Every year.
When?
In the summer, we would go to spend some time with my grandparents there in Alvarado.
And what'd you do?
Fish.
You caught fish?
Caught fish.
He's the one who removed all the fish from the lake.
He must have. Did you eat them?
Absolutely. Ate everything we caught.
Yeah. Tell everybody about how you would make, what kind of fishing poles you'd make if you didn't have one, because every time I went, we didn't have one. So tell them what you'd do.
Well, we used bamboo poles, just stationary bamboo poles, and had our fishing line tied to that, and dropped it in the lake with a bobber, and worked well.
Yeah, that's right. So you grew up going to the land there, but your dad, what did he work for? Tell everybody what he did for a living.
He worked for the Atomic Energy Commission. So again, out of World War II, he worked for Boeing for a little while and then went to work for the Atomic Energy Commission, which actually had us travel over a good bit of the U.S. as we were growing up.
Yeah, what are some of the stops you guys made?
Well, we began in Fort Worth and then went to Overland Park, Kansas, Springfield, Kansas, and then to Amarillo, Texas, and then to Albuquerque, New Mexico.
I thought you were Don't forget Massachusetts. I mean,
I did forget
most people
Massachusetts.
do forget Massachusetts, and it's a very forgettable place. Sorry, folks. We have legions of fans, and so all of our Massachusetts contingency is going to be upset. But you did spend some time there, correct?
Yeah, a little place outside Boston, I think.
All right. And then you ended up back in Albuquerque. How old are you then?
6th grade. So I don't know how old you are in 6th grade, but that's when I landed there in Albuquerque.
And you did your dad work at Los Alamos?
He did.
Oh, wow.
The secret city.
Yeah, he did?
Well, he would visit that as part of his job responsibility. He worked on the Sandia base, Sandia Corporation there.
Wow. So during all that movement.
They're being in Albuquerque.
Okay.
And he would visit.
The secret city in Los Alamos?
Yeah.
Did he go to Area 51? Do you know?
Don't know, never said.
Okay.
There's a lot of what he...
Did you ask him stuff? He goes, I can't tell you?
Exactly.
Oh, man, that's too bad.
He would always, I can't tell you that. And so we didn't know a lot of what he did, only where he would go.
So what you're really saying is he was in the CIA and we just didn't really know it.
That's another family member. Yeah.
Okay.
That's the other side of the family.
During all that traveling, and you mentioned that your dad was a godly man, did you guys join different churches while you were moving around, or did you how did you guys, did you join churches there?
We always attended a local church in the different places that we lived. And the Church of Christ is a denomination that's pretty well spread out through the country. So
now, most people don't know what the Church of Christ is. Have you heard of the Church of Christ?
Briefly, yeah.
And so there's two kinds of churches of Christ. There's the Disciples of Christ, which used to be called the Church of Christ, and then there's the Church of Christ that are like Campbellites, which
And that's separate than the International Church of Christ.
which that's the cult.
That's the
And
one we talked about
That's
before.
the cult,
yeah.
and that's the Disciples of Christ. Those
they
switch,
changed it.
they
Okay.
switch it, yeah.
Gotcha.
So now talk to us about the Church of Christ, like some of the distinctives of the Church of Christ that you grew up with.
Well, probably the major distinctive is that they had a love for the Word and a respect for the Word and a belief in the inerrancy of the Word. So the Word was what was preached, taught. The challenge became the application of the Word, because there was a different belief on the empowerment of the Holy Spirit to live out the Word. So it was pretty much... the sanctification focus was pretty much on yourself to be able to walk out what the Word is telling me to do. And I think as we'll go through this in later life, I began to see the Holy Spirit has a different work and a more extensive work in the soul and work of the Christian.
Yeah.
So that would be an area that we just began to see, in our view, a deficiency.
Now, the Church of Christ also, if you walk into a Church of Christ, I don't know what it's like today, but you landed at Montgomery Church of Christ in Albuquerque, New Mexico, right?
Right.
Which your parents had a hand in helping start, right?
Yeah, they were. When we moved there, it was actually on North San Pedro, and then they built a building at Montgomery Boulevard and became one of the largest Church of Christ there in Albuquerque when we were there.
And the area too, right?
In the area, yeah.
And it's still there.
It is still there, not in the same location, but the church.
Oh, they moved it.
Yeah, the church is in a different location.
Okay. Talk about your dad's involvement in the church.
My dad was a leader in the church. He was an elder. He would also lead worship, kind of backing up some of the other guys. Would teach, preach occasionally, but was a governing elder in the church as long as I can remember.
And what about your grandfather?
My grandfather, in the same way.
Man, you got a pattern.
He was an elder in the Church of Christ there in Alvarado, Texas, for, again, as long as I can remember, up until when he passed away.
What about his father? Do you know?
His father was also a Christian.
Yeah.
I'm not sure the denominational affiliation or if there was one back that far. But our Christian roots go back as far as we know the people.
That's cool.
Yeah, it is cool.
Yeah, and as far as you know, Church of Christ, the connection with the family was with your grandfather, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And we're obviously not a Church of Christ, and then we're going to talk about this later, but there was no little challenge in our family when you and Mom decided not to be Church of Christ, correct?
Correct. Putting it lightly.
To say the least, right?
To say the least.
Put it mildly.
Yeah. Did they think you were leaving the faith?
Yeah, there was a sense that the Church of Christ, at least when we were in it, was the only church.
Ooh.
So that if you left the Church of Christ, it would be like you're losing your salvation. And that would be an aspect of where within the Church of Christ, there would be a sense that you could lose your salvation if you don't walk in the right way as defined by attendance and being a part of the Church of Christ.
Gotcha.
So I want to take it back to, when do you feel as if you became a Christian in that period of time? So you mentioned a long line of faithfulness from your dad to your grandfather to even your great-grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
Was there a specific point of conversion for you, or is it more like, I've always thought I was a Christian?
Well, growing up in a Christian home, to where that's the air you breathe, it really is a blessing. But you do have to come to a point where you realize you're lost. And that moment did come for me when I was about 7 years old.
Okay. Is that what Lynn said? About 7 or 8?
Something like that, yeah.
Wow.
And I just remember being so taken by the fact that, am I a Christian? Just because I know this, and my family is, my parents are, my older sister, I had an older sister, younger brother. And it just weighed on me. So I went to talk to my dad, and I just said, Dad, I want to be a Christian. And, I don't know if I died if I'd go to heaven today. And so, again, in the Church of Christ, salvation and water baptism were linked very tightly. And so I was actually baptized as a young 7, 8-year-old boy.
Okay.
But I was just so grateful at that point, just feeling, okay, I'm saved.
Yeah. So looking back, that was 64 years ago, if my math is correct. Would you say that was a genuine conversion? I mean, obviously then it felt very real. Do you still view it as that was the time you were converted?
I do. I do think that.
Yeah.
I did become, when I was 18, I think when I was 18, I got baptized again in the Church of Christ. And my thought process then is like, I've learned so much since I was 7. Was I really saved when I was that young? And so, again, salvation and baptism being so intertwined, I wanted to make sure. So, and the process there is, after the service, you go forward and you're baptized in front of the church. They had a baptistry right there.
There's no conversations right then, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Like almost an altar call, or?
Yes.
Almost. It wasn't an emotional altar call.
Yeah. Okay. So now we have age 7 through age 18, Christian Trey. What are your aspirations at age 18? What do you want to do? What year is it? Just to have us get an understanding of the culture and the political climate. And I think there was a question I told you beforehand. When you were 18, how did the culture look at Christianity? If there was 3 buckets, right now I would say, and I'm speculating, that the culture at large looks at Christianity in a negative way, as if we're bigoted or closed-minded or just too strict or legalistic, whereas maybe in other areas they looked at it as neutral, or in some eras, maybe early on, they looked at Christianity as a positive thing. How was it for you when you were growing up?
Yeah, Christianity was seen as really an honorable way to live your life. When I was in 5th grade, my teacher, I think her name was Mrs. Brown, you did all, we didn't move classes. You had one class all day long. And first half of the year, as we began before the Pledge of Allegiance, we'd stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Before that, we would recite the Lord's Prayer together. And then the second half of the year, we would read or recite the 23rd Psalm. And there are many times that my teacher would pray. So that was the environment growing up that I was used to, having prayer in the public schools, and that it was not only an honorable thing to be a Christian, but it was revered.
Yeah.
And that character, the world would see it as a character aspect. And so even political leaders, they were always careful to, express how they go to church.
Yeah.
And it was just a different environment back in those days.
Yeah.
What was good about that and what was bad about that?
What was good about that is because it just elevating the view of Christianity. What's not good about that is were people really seeing the need of salvation and the genuine aspect of salvation? Were they really saved or just living good lives and just wanting to be known as someone that goes to church?
Yeah, like virtue signaling.
Because that would have been a positive thing in the community. If you're a dentist, if you're a doctor, if you're
Right.
whatever, if you own a cryogenics place, you want to go to church and just be a respected member of society, right?
Yeah,
And so there could be people at church who are there to just be seen, see and be seen. Yes.
correct.
So that's the negative side. But the positive side is we weren't regarded as dangerous people, right?
Yeah.
Right. It was easy to be a Christian.
Yeah. All right. So you're a Christian as a 7-year-old. You go to junior high. Sports. Did you play sports?
I did. Played football and junior high. Actually, you couldn't go out for football before the 9th grade. So went out the 9th grade, and I was a little young. I started a year early. So
you're younger than all the other kids.
yeah, most of them. And
Texas football, right? Not flag football.
no, this is tackle football.
Yeah. There was no
was-
such thing as flag football back then.
Yeah, we didn't have that. Didn't have soccer. Didn't have a lot of things I have today. But I was 4'11" and 110 pounds and ready to play football.
Tell everybody what happened that ended your football career.
Yeah, broke my shoulder later that year. And
Tell everybody how the coach responded.
he told me to run it off, which is typically what they said to any injury that you have, is just run it off.
I love that.
And could you run it off?
I couldn't run it off.
What did you try?
I didn't even try.
And so what do you bear, like, tell everybody what the effect was after that?
Well, it jammed my whatever bone up into the shoulder joint and broke the growth ring. So my arm hasn't grown between my shoulder and my elbow since 9th grade. So it's about 1.5 inches shorter than my other arm.
So you have your 4'11", 110-pound bicep.
Yeah.
On which side, right or left?
Left side.
I was wondering, you get positioned a certain way. I couldn't see it, but yeah.
And all right, so that football career ended. But what sport did you do in high school?
I both wrestled and played baseball. But wrestling is what I did more of.
And were better at, yes? Because you got to, you competed for state
Yeah.
stuff and regional things and things
Yeah, I
like
had a little bit more success there.
that. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, as a kid, when your dad's a wrestler, you can do nothing. Nothing.
You got no
'Cause
moves.
I have no moves. As a
you need some cheat
7-year-old,
codes.
12-year-old, 15-year-old, still no moves.
Wow.
And so he can still throw me on my back when I was 15 years old because he was a wrestler, for sure.
Yeah.
So talk about how you met my mom, your wife.
Yeah.
Yeah, I met Charlotte in December 13th, 1968.
He knows the day.
Well, why is that? Because
because my mom had orchestrated a birthday party for me, which is my birthday is the 13th of December,
Okay.
and had the youth group come to my birthday party, and Charlotte and her family were part of our church. So my mom actually sat her across the table from me. It was at a restaurant, and that's where I
So she
really met her.
that was a setup from
From my mom, yeah. She would say
Wow.
she set that up on purpose.
Wow. And you had never met Charlotte at church
I
before
knew
that?
who she was,
Yeah.
but I had never talked to her because she was a year younger than me in high school.
Yeah. And that seems like a huge age
that
difference.
was a huge difference, yeah.
Yeah.
I was a senior. She was a junior.
Off limits.
So, yeah.
And so you talked?
Yeah, we talked and actually started dating shortly after that. Let's see, that was
1968.
68, and we married in 71.
And
That's
so,
a stretch.
well, how old were you when you got married? Tell everybody that.
19.
Both of you, right?
Yep, we were both 19. Yeah, I had left when I graduated at the end of my senior year in 69. I left to go to Abilene Christian College for 1 year and then came back and finished my degree at the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque to be there with Charlotte.
And what was that degree?
It was in business.
And that's what you were interested in? That's the way you thought you were going?
Actually, when I was a freshman at Abilene Christian College, the major that I declared was Bible. I was actually thinking about being what we called then in the Church of Christ a preacher. But I remember thinking, I just don't want to live in a fishbowl, have a life like that. So I went into business and changed my major from the sophomore year forward.
And so then maybe talk to us about your family. Your family, you and mom.
Okay. Yeah, we have 4 children. Oldest sitting across the table, Rich. And then another boy, his name is Clint, followed by a third son, Clay, and our daughter, Courtney.
Well, we know Clint listens, so shout out to Clint.
Exactly. Now, after you got married, you graduated, then you joined up with, like, to start your career. Where did you get your first job?
First job was working for IBM and I was actually hired in Lubbock, Texas, in the branch office there. So we moved from Albuquerque to Lubbock, Texas, putting everything we owned in a 14-foot U-Haul trailer and borrowed my dad's truck to get it all out there. So began in Lubbock, Texas with IBM.
And what was your first job at IBM?
First job was in administration. It was someone who would receive computer orders and put them into the system and track them and then make sure they got to the customer when they were shipped and they paid for it. So it was that whole administrative piece was what my first job was.
They're computer orders, right? Computer orders. 'Cause
Right.
For those of you, we're not video yet, but I'm doing air quotes
Yeah.
because they are not computers the way we would think of them today, correct?
That's correct.
What year were you started at IBM? What year was that?
1973.
Okay, so just a basic search. You were in the middle of the mainframe era / PC revolution there. So the mainframe were the computers from 1952 and then in 1964. And then in the 80s, there was the PC revolution, the IBM personal computer in 1981, setting industry standards for personal computing hardware. They're very popular for MS-DOS operating system, which was a precursor to Microsoft.
Yep.
So just a quick little what IBM was at that time, I thought would be helpful.
What was working for IBM like?
It was very good. We enjoyed working for IBM. It was demanding. We were transferred around a lot, and that's the way IBM handled their promotions, is they promoted from within, which was great.
Yeah.
I mean, it was very merit-bound type employment.
Yeah.
So to be promoted, would you have to move?
Typically, yeah, because where I was out in the branch office, they called them, out in the field, there was just a limited number of those positions. So when you went to, like, I went from the administrative group to managing that. If there's not a need for a manager in your location, then they transfer you to a location that did have a need for, that level management.
So talk us through the cities you lived in.
Well, like I said, we started in Lubbock, Texas, then went to working in the Fort Worth, Texas branch, and then the Dallas branch, and then the New Orleans branch, and ended up in El Paso as the last stop.
So all of those were promotions all along the way.
That's great. Yeah. So
you were a manager how long?
I was a manager probably of the 16 years, probably 12 of them. 12, 13 of them.
12 or 13? As a manager in IBM, what was the craziest story that ever happened to you as a manager?
Well, I did have one of my employees shoot the other.
Yeah, that's the one I was trying to pull out.
That's right, exactly.
I was going to
bring it up. You got to walk us through that.
Wow.
You got to walk us through that. Now, let me tell you, as a 7-year-old when this happened, or 6-year-old or whatever, I remember being they had a Pontiac Le Mans, a white thing, and we weren't wearing seatbelts back then, but
they didn't have them, did they?
I think they did. I don't know. I was standing in the back seat.
Yes, we did.
I wasn't wearing it. I was not wearing them.
They were
My
viewed
mom
as
said,
dangerous.
Hey, my mom said, listen, your dad's coming home. He had a hard day. Don't give him a hard time because somebody got shot.
Mom just let it rip.
She just let it go. And I was like, somebody got shot? Yeah. Well, are they okay? Well, I don't know. We need to pray for him. And that was all I knew. So anyway, tell us the story.
Well, I was working in New Orleans at the time, and when we were transferred to New Orleans, it's a pretty expensive city to live in. So we lived outside of New Orleans in a place called Slidell. So it was about a 45-minute drive into work each day. It was a 45-minute drive if you left at 5:30 in the morning, and it was about a 2-hour drive if I left about 7.
Mm-hmm.
So I would leave early in the morning, get there, get to work, 6:30 or 6:30 each day. And one morning I was there, and actually,
tell the story. You got to tell the story. This is how it goes. This is the real gritty.
Yes. If your children are listening, this might be the moment where you cover their ears, get the earmuffs out.
No, this isn't earmuff stuff, but I know what he's going to say. Go ahead.
I had to wear a suit to work every day.
Suit and tie, yes?
Yeah. Yeah,
no work from home, none of that.
No work from. I didn't know what that was. And the zipper was stuck at times, so I had to mess with the zipper. So I was actually in the restroom, and I heard a series of sounds that turned out to be gunshots. And so I immediately am trying to get out there, but my zipper's stuck. So it took me, several seconds to get my zipper fixed. And when I went out there, I saw one of my employees shot about 4 times leaning up against the elevator wall, not in the elevator, but the wall outside of the elevator. And so I was able to get him down on the floor, and had been trained in first aid and just tried to stop the bleeding as much as I could.
Mm-hmm.
There was one other person there, and I asked them to call 911 and get the medics up there. So that began a crazy day.
The ambulance had a hard time finding the building, right?
Well, in her excitement, the little secretary asked to call 911. They said, we're in the IBM building, and there is no IBM building. We were in the Likes Tower.
Okay.
And there is an ITM building, which was across the street, and that's where everybody went.
Oh, man.
So I had about half an hour just
Of keeping him alive.
of just, yeah.
Did you wrap them up with your chute or something, or like towels or whatever you could find?
I just more applied pressure with my hands.
Yeah.
There was just such an immediate need.
And he was conscious?
He was conscious the whole time, yeah.
And talk about who did it.
Well, who did it was actually another employee of mine.
Of yours, right? So you got, wow.
And
Did you hire these employees, Trey?
I didn't hire him, but I was responsible for him. And unfortunately, they had a relationship that went sour, and she shot him.
She went real sour.
So you guys got an HR department after that, I'm guessing.
Yeah, so...
And didn't she come up the elevator? Talk about that.
Well, when the police did get there, the medic, for whatever reason, when he opened up his bag, he didn't have the right kind of bandages.
Oh, gosh.
Oh, man.
So I said, well,
Wrong building.
let me go get our first aid kit, because I know we've got some. So I went to get that. And when I came back, actually, no, let me back up. It was before they got there. The police hit the floor, kind of like a SWAT team. And so they're going all over, just seeing if there was a shooter present. And about that time, when I was the only one with the guy who got shot in the elevator lobby, the elevator doors open up, and there's the little lady that shot him. And she comes out, what happened? And he's down here, and he's like, you shot me. You know what happened. I'm like,
Did he use
wait a minute.
Wait, did he use colorful language?
He did use colorful language.
Yeah.
And so I used all of my authority
you're
as a
there,
manager.
right? You're there with the lady who shot him, and you don't know if she has the gun.
Don't know that. And I looked her in the eye and I said, oh, Helen, I want you to get in the elevator and go down to the bottom floor. And she did.
He does have that voice. Why don't you sit? Because he didn't simulate that voice. He uses this voice with people he doesn't know, or people who are in trouble, or people who are causing trouble. He's got this voice which is really scary. I don't think he can do it here, but
Yeah, I can't do it on call.
no, he can't. But like, if you ever see it, you'll know. So Helen goes down, and then what happened to him?
Well, ultimately he lived, and we're hoping he came to the Lord.
Now, why would you hope that?
He came to visit us afterwards, and we invited him to come to church and talk to him about the Lord. And so don't know really where it went from that, but we certainly hope and pray that he did. He's since passed away.
Not by shot.
Not
by getting shot.
what he experienced, but a heart attack later in life.
And what about Heartbreak Helen? Whatever happened to her?
Don't know.
What happened to her? Like, was she like the authorities clearly got involved?
Yep. And she was on trial. I was actually one of the witnesses at the trial. She was acquitted.
She was?
She was acquitted.
The glove didn't fit.
The mental turmoil they determined was too much.
So she didn't spend any time in prison?
She, I think, later did, because there was some evidence of her hiring a hitman.
Right. Because she was coming after you, right?
No, she wasn't coming after me.
But weren't they afraid? Wasn't IBM afraid that, like, hey, you need to watch out because...
Yeah. Initially, they were like, we'll be glad to transfer you wherever you want to go. If you're concerned about that. No, I wasn't.
Okay.
I mean, I always found her to be, a nice lady.
Yeah, sure.
Just went off the rails.
Yeah, no kidding.
So lots of years moving around with IBM, and you eventually land in El Paso. How long between when you started at IBM and El Paso?
Why don't we save that for next time?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we'll stop here. Thanks for listening. If you have any questions, reach out at production@senatorgilbert.com and join us for part 2. And thanks for tuning in.